The Pelicans have the option to take or defer the Lakers' first-round pick in this year's draft. I'll tell you why they should wait until they find out who the Lakers' next head coach will be to make that decision. It's the Friday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with y'all with this Friday show, and we're going to look at what the Pelicans need to do with that Los Angeles Lakers pick, or what they should do with that Los Angeles Lakers pick. And I'll tell you in a second the date they need to make that decision by. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are the #1 Pelicans podcast coming to y'all like nobody else does, giving you deep dives into this team here, looking at the draft, looking at free agency, looking at the trade market. We'll have a whole lot more to come as well. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. So let's get into this. The Lakers pick, the 17th pick in this draft. The Pelicans could have it, 17 and 21. But they don't need to make that decision yet. In fact, they don't need to make that decision for about 2 more weeks until June 1st is when they need to decide if they're keeping this Lakers pick this year or kicking it out another year to 2025, next year's draft. There's reasons to take it. There's reasons to punt it into the future. But let's look at the Lakers overall and try and kind of maybe predict a little bit of what's going on next year. Because they're in some turmoil. You know, they want to win a championship right now. Well, everyone would like to win a championship right now, obviously. They kind of need to. With LeBron James in the end of his career, you know, not a ton of future assets and things that they can do. A roster that didn't really get them anywhere this year. They're not in a very good position for trying to retool this roster right now. And is there an end of the runway coming for this team? You know, they fired Darvin Ham, their head coach, who took them to the playoffs in back-to-back years, including a Western Conference Finals in his first year, where they were swept by the Denver Nuggets. So they have an extensive search that they don't seem to be in a rush to go about trying to fill that head coaching position. And names include, we've talked about this, James Borrego here for the Pelicans. They are looking at other guys around the league who have some head coaching experience, who are some assistants as well. But one of the names that has been rumored to be the front runner is JJ Redick, former Pelican player, 15-year NBA vet and current media person, podcaster, with no real head coaching experience whatsoever. And JJ Redick is smart. We know this from his time here in New Orleans. He's very well spoken. You know, he went to a strong school in Duke where they teach you a lot about basketball. He knows basketball. His podcast with LeBron James is very insightful and gives you a lot of kind of like X's and O's kind of talk that you don't get a ton of anywhere else, to be perfectly honest. And I think it's been really great to listen to that. I think it's very informative. But he doesn't have coaching experience beyond like youth basketball. Yes, he's been in locker rooms. He's been able to exert influence. And when he was brought into New Orleans, he was brought here because of Zion Williamson to kind of be a bit of a mentor to him with that Duke connection and to bring him along and to kind of teach him maturity, responsibility, leadership, all of those things. Do you remember Zion's first couple of years in the league, though? Did that work out? Not really. It kind of took CJ bullying him on the national stage, saying he hasn't returned my calls, I haven't spoken to him, to get Zion to kind of like wake up. And even then, that didn't fully do it. It was only this past season, you know, well removed from his time with JJ Redick, that he really kind of matured into the person we wanted to see him. So you're bringing in someone who has no head coaching experience. And this job is tough. That Lakers job is tough. win now, but also develop for the future, do the X's and O's things. It's got like so much required to it, and all head coaching jobs do, that you fired a guy that was, by all accounts, like a somewhat of a winner there, not maybe to the level that they wanted, but when you look at that roster and what they did with it this year, I don't really have tons of complaints. Lakers fans do. Everyone hates their head coach about Darvin Ham. So you're going to bring in someone with less experience that maybe isn't going to be able to command the locker room that you want him to. And there have already been other players coming out and saying, if JJ Redick's the head coach, maybe this isn't the spot for him to be a first-time head coach. They're going to be in there and saying, is LeBron James just running the team? Is LeBron James just using him as a proxy coach? And the answer easily could be yes, right? They clearly have a very strong relationship with one another. I don't know if that's a recipe for them doing things particularly well. Anthony Davis and LeBron James have kind of at times been shadow GMs for that. They wanted Russell Westbrook in there, and that set the Lakers back big time and was a disaster of a move. So how's this impact the Pelicans, right? Here's the thing. If they're going to if they hire JJ Redick, the Pelicans should defer this pick. The Pelicans should defer this pick if they hire JJ Redick. That's the crux of this segment here. This pick is already less valuable, and we'll get into that in the next two segments here. And the sense I get from folks with the Pelicans talking to people is nothing set, but deferring it seems like a move. Particularly if they hire JJ Redick, you should do that because you're betting on the Lakers to be a disaster next year. And even if they're not, even if they're okay, say they're at the same level they were this year, they got in as the 7th seed, right? By beating the Pelicans in that play-in tournament game, and then got bounced out of the first round pretty easily, 4-1 versus the Denver Nuggets. That's a team that won 47 games. How many more are they going to realistically win next season? They're not going to draft a guy. They have 3 first-round picks they can trade. They can trade that regardless of whether the Pelicans use this pick this year or next season. So they have 3 first-round picks, and we'll get into why maybe the 2025 pick is going to be more valuable than this one. Give them the worst of that pick to kind of upgrade their roster slightly less, force them to figure stuff out right now, I think, and bet on them being not much better next year. The big thing we've said is if you're not dramatically improving your roster, it's going to be more of the same next year or you're regressing. I think betting on that with the Lakers could be a really smart choice here. And so if they hire JJ Redick, particularly Redick, you've got to bounce that pick another year and kick it down the line because I think it's going to be more valuable next season. So let's get into why. There's a couple of reasons why. This is a weak draft. And by the way, picks are worth more in the future, correct? I'll explain what I mean by that coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role, and that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs is a tool to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. When you're running a small business, you can't have those open positions. You need things covered. It's probably costing you money. You got to get someone good in the door quickly, and that's what LinkedIn Jobs does. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all of that while making the process easy and intuitive. So hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. So that's why they're going to help you do it. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know, looking at the draft, the big decisions around this team, like that Lakers pick. For your second listen, the NFL schedule just dropped. Ross Jackson, host of Locked On Saints, is making sense of everything black and gold. I saw him a bunch this weekend. Dude is the best. Go subscribe to Locked On Saints wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube as well. So we were talking about the Lakers pick and what the Pelicans need to do. And let's switch to draft talk because it ties into this a little bit. This is a weak draft. This is a weak draft. That alone is a reason to defer this pick to next season. This pick is 17 in this draft. That in another draft would be worth way more. In last year's draft, this 17th pick is probably in like the mid to late 20s. That's how weak this draft is compared to other years. So why do you want that? The Pelicans want to win now. Adding 2 rookies because they have the 21st pick as well probably isn't really the move. And I don't think you're going to be able to package those 2 picks and trade up. And even then, that's probably not exactly what you want to do anyway, unless you could get a guy like Dalton Connect, I think. But I don't think you're going to be able to move up that high with these 2 picks in a weaker draft. So this draft is weak. If you're looking at it just from a pure value standpoint, something that the Pelicans do, defer it. Don't take the draft pick in the weaker draft. Take the draft pick in next year. If it ends up at 20 next year instead of 17, you're still probably getting a player that grades out higher next year than you would have this year with a pick further up. That's worth keeping in mind. And particularly if the Lakers have a ton of turmoil, don't make the postseason. They could have not. If the Pelicans had beaten them, who knows if the Lakers would have beaten the Kings in the play-in tournament game. There was a chance, and look, it was looking like that for a minute, with Zion scored 40. If that happens again, that's great. If this ends up as a lottery pick next year, that's something that you have an opportunity to really be a big asset for you. Just in terms of drafting a player for the team or the pick having more value with it. And we've seen the Lakers rush moves, make bad moves, offseason moves, bringing in Russell Westbrook, etc. They might do a similar thing here. We've heard that Trae Young is probably not on their radar anymore. Maybe DeJounte Murray is, but how much does that truly elevate that team? They also need to figure out what to do with D'Angelo, Russell, and other things. That team has some problems. They're not horrible. LeBron and Anthony Davis will take you far. But by the same point, it's only going so far. It's not taking you to a title. And I don't know if they're going to be able to make a move that does that. So they can get into the first round, lose again, and the Pelicans will still be in a real good position with that pick. So it's a weak draft. And they could be a disaster with a brand new head coach who's dramatically in over his head. There's also kind of the idea of draft picks are worth more in the future. They just kind of always are. We, at times, I think, place an overemphasis of value on first-round picks, right? It's about what they kind of represent. There's potential there. It could be anything, right? It could even be a boat. And that's what I think people think about, right? Picks are way more valuable, and once they become an actual player, that value drops significantly when it comes to that sort of thing. And that's something that kind of factors into this as well. And that'll get into what I want to talk more about in the next segment here about flexibility. And that I think is an important thing for the Pelicans as well when it comes to trying to kind of reshape their roster. So while they want to do it, we don't know for sure if they're going to end up making a Brandon Ingram trade this offseason. Seems like it, but say maybe the circumstances don't align. Then what? You need some flexibility built into your future plans because this is constantly changing. And I think by deferring that pick, it does that. More on that in the next segment here. But picks are always worth more in the future when you don't know what they are. This is the 17th pick in a weak draft. We know that. That's going to be some kind of player. Let me pull up some of the names that are kind of like in that range here for 17. And when you look at them, it's like, I don't know about that. That could be Yves Missy, right? That could be Kyle Filipowski. That could be Devin Carter if you're looking for a point guard there, right? On the high end, maybe it's Cody Williams if you're lucky and he falls that far, and I don't think that'll end up happening. Kelly Ware is an option there. There's a couple of names, I think. There could be Deron Holmes. There's a couple of names there that I think are fine to go in that range, but in next year's draft wouldn't be touching that whatsoever because all of those guys have like serious question marks around them with nearly everything. So it's the 17th pick in a weak draft. But next year's pick, even if next year's pick for the Lakers isn't going to be top 5, right? Probably not going to be top 10. The end of the lottery pick, so 14, is kind of your best case scenario, your best case realistic scenario, assuming no injuries and things like that, to the Los Angeles Lakers. And we don't root for injuries, but can LeBron James keep kind of beating Father Time the way that he has been doing it? So, that pick could be the 14th. It could represent more, right? It could be a top 5 pick. There's a couple of y'all, when I said it's not a top 5 pick, immediately said, well, if LeBron James gets hurt, it's a top 5 pick. See? That's what you're hoping for, that people think about that draft pick next year. You kind of prove the point right there. It could be anything. There's some realistic ranges of what it would be, but that's not always how people think. And if you don't like any of the players in this draft, you're going to like the ones next year better. Simple as that. And so this pick represents that too. So this pick has probably more value in the future. First round picks always do. And then they become an actual player, and that value just immediately seems to drop. Like when you draft a guy, could you trade him for that exact same pick like next year? Probably not. Before they've ever played? Probably not. And even after they've played? Probably not, unless they played like really, really, really well. That tends to be how it works in the NBA. So for those reasons, I think this, this is a weak draft. The value of this pick is low. Use it in the future. If you're looking at trading Brandon Ingram and the 17th pick, say someone wants it in a trade, or you're trying to entice them into a trade with it, do they want that or do they want it next year? If you give them the option, what's the other team going to say? They're probably going to say, like, give me next year's pick. Because then they probably need to do something, because Brandon Ingram likely is being traded to a contender. They need to kind of make a decision and moves, and having that pick for the future is important. That ties into the flexibility thing that I was talking about. Let's look at that coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans, because I think that's a really important part of this. But right now, eBay Motors is probably one of the places I shop at the most. Passion, drive, patience, the winning formula for a championship is also what keeps your vehicle alive. And eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. My cars are on the road because of eBay Motors. Whether you want to make them go faster, sound louder, have more utility to it, or simply just run, or have your air conditioning working in this Louisiana heat, that's why you go to eBay Motors, because with over 122 million parts for your vehicle, you're always going to find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, my favorite part, it's guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. And their prices are good. I shop around for parts all the time, and I always end up going back to eBay Motors. So you're burning rubber, not cash. So with all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to keep your vehicle on the alive and running. So keep your vehicle on the road over at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And we're talking about deferring the Los Angeles Lakers pick. I think they should defer. Let me know what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments down below on YouTube. Now, for your second listen, don't go for the yelling. Don't go for sports talk that's not actually sports talk or anything like that. You want to know what's going on in the world. Or world of sports. So don't watch Fox Sports, ESPN, other places. Do you have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to a free 24/7 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Become an everydayer of Locked On Pelicans. Listen Monday through Friday. If you're an everydayer, let me know down below. We'll probably do another live show next week. That was a lot of fun. We're going to just do a bonus live show where I just interact with y'all on the stream and everything like that too, for getting me over 10,000 Pelicans fans here on YouTube. So let's start to wrap up the show, final segment here, as we talk about deferring this pick. And I think they should defer it, particularly if they hire JJ Redick, right? If they came in and hired someone like Kenny Atkinson or someone else who has a lot of like experience, say they had gotten like Mike Budenholzer, a coach that was going to win, I don't know if I would have thought the exact same way about deferring it. I still probably would have, but I don't think I would have been like, heck yeah, you need to. Here, now, like, absolutely defer. It feels like defer the pick if you hired JJ Redick. I think Redick could be a good head coach eventually. Is that going to be with the Lakers this season? Probably not, right? It feels like that is a really tough job, and how is that going to work in the locker room? And that's, I think, something that they need to really start to figure out first before you do anything with that and make some of those moves. So with that, defer the pick. But you also do it because it's a weak draft, because picks have more value in the future, but it also gives you more flexibility than you realize. Brandon Ingram, I don't know if he's going to be traded before the draft or before June 1st. Like, he's not going to be traded before June 1st, it feels like, right? Like, if there would be a deal, it feels like it would be done like a day or two or on draft night, a day or two before the draft or on draft night, right? And the Pelicans made that trade, Anthony Davis trade, then they ended up with a 4th pick and then traded that like the day of the draft to move down and take 8 and 17, I think, and move Solomon Hill. So that's how you kind of see deals get done. It's usually on like draft day when there's the NBA just needs a timer. They need like the deadline to get things done, and then things actually get done. It doesn't get done before that. So if Brandon Ingram's not going to be traded before that, you don't want the 17th pick thinking you're going to include it in a Brandon Ingram trade and then not find a trade. Say it doesn't happen for whatever reason. You're stuck with that 17th pick in a weak draft, and now you've used an asset poorly. It's not a great position to be in if you're a small market. But also if Brandon Ingram's trade market doesn't materialize and you do sign him to some sort of an extension, whatever that might be, maybe it's not a full max on 4 years, maybe though it's 2 years and much more money just to extend him a little bit and give you team control and flexibility, or maybe it's 4 years and less than what he was hoping for, you have future flexibility. Now all of a sudden, it's not like you have a rookie from a weak draft. Say it's like Kelly Oubre, right, with 17. And, now you're trying to move Brandon Ingram. Teams are like, yeah, we don't want that guy. We'd rather have the draft pick, because they would. It represents something else. And you don't have that anymore. So having future flexibility just in case a Brandon Ingram trade doesn't exist or a trade market for him doesn't exist, that I think is an important thing. This team also likely won't be complacent at next February, so 2025, the trade deadline for next season in mid-February. They're probably going to want to make a move to upgrade the roster depending on what it is. I don't think I think they're going to come in with a new roster if it doesn't work. They're going to then try and kind of retool it at the trade deadline and make other moves as well. So you need draft picks for that. This Lakers one, depending on how their season is going, could have a ton of value at the trade deadline next year. Look at who's available right now. Trae Young, DeJounte Murray, Donovan Mitchell would be kind of like the higher end tier guy. Who else? It's like super good. Lauri Markkanen doesn't sound like very available to me based on what the Utah Jazz want from him. That's like not a number that anyone is going to do, let alone the Pelicans. So who could be available at the trade deadline next year? That's, again, it's kind of like stuff in the future. The unknowns are worth more because they could be anything, right? Is then, maybe Miles Turner going to be available, and that's how you upgrade your center position at the trade deadline next year, right? Could Cade Cunningham, if Detroit's terrible again, force a trade out of Detroit, and would you want to go and get a guy like that? Those are some of the ideas behind this, and who's going to be that next disgruntled star? What if the Sacramento Kings just aren't in a good position at all, and maybe De'Aaron Fox is like, enough, like you've tried, we're not making progress, I want to go somewhere else. I don't think he's going to be available this summer. If he says, yeah, get me out of here, could you then trade Brandon Ingram and that Lakers pick for De'Aaron Fox at the trade deadline? That's an option, right? If the Lakers especially are looking bad, they get still a star enough player and a good future asset from a rival team too. What about Joel Embiid if they continue to struggle and not win? Having that future pick for future flexibility, future trades, I think is more important right now, because I think if you're including that in a deal right now, teams are not upset about it, but they'd rather have something else. And I think that's really important when it comes to all of this. The Pelicans have not managed their assets in the very, very best of ways, so we'd like to see them do it a little bit more. I don't think they've done a poor job of it either, but they haven't kind of cashed in on some of these picks like we would have hoped for to bring in like truly game-changing players that they kind of did with CJ McCollum. So doing that, I think later when this pick has more value is the way to do it. But we'll see. But it definitely feels like they're going to defer. It doesn't definitely feel like they're going to defer this pick. They could fall in love with a player. They kind of have done that, right? Like they really eyed Trey Murphy in that draft, and kind of really went after him and really wanted him. Same thing with Kyra Lewis Jr., same thing with Dyson Daniels, right? They've really kind of key in on one or two guys that they really want to try and get. They wanted Grady Dick this past year, and he was just drafted before them. So if they do that again here and they think he's going to be gone after 17, then they'll keep that pick, and they have a pretty good idea of who they like, who they want, and it works out more often than not, I'd say. So that's worth keeping in mind too. I don't think it's a guarantee that they're going to defer this pick. I don't think they know for sure yet. So that's something that's worth keeping in mind, and that's why nothing needs to get done right now. That's why no Brandon Ingram traction is going to happen right now either, till everyone's done scouting these players and building out their big boards and understanding what they want to do in the future. In the future, though, is going to be another episode of Locked On Pelicans, because this one is done. Thank you all so much for listening. We are Locked On Pelicans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join almost 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, and I'll be back with you all next time.